Do you want to make figures like this, and this? Well then, stay tuned, I shall show you the way of the paper crafter. But first of all, I've had a voice change recently. I hope
you prefer this one. As I promised from the very beginning of my channel, I finally got to make this video for you, of how to recreate the standard scheme/design I use for most of my paper figures. The design and style is heavily inspired by PaperPatriot, but I decided to bring in some elements that are more characteristic of me. Blue star. Anyway, let's begin the tutorial that many of you waited for. To start with, here are the materials and tools you need to recreate what you see: a pencil or a pen, scissors, multiple types preferably, a measuring tool of your choice, some scotch tape, a knife or cutter, very optional, a piece of clay, naturally, the paper. Here the choice is yours. There are many types of paper to choose from. You could even use newspapers, if you have them. I personally just use some standard printing paper. You will also need card, not to be mistaken with cardboard. Next you'll need a glue gun, or any other type of glue that you think is strong enough to hold paper together for a long time, meaning that a glue stick wouldn't be acceptable. Don't forget to add markers and black liners. In theory you could also use any other type of coloring equipment you have available. You don't have to specifically have alcohol-based markers. You could use watercolors for example. Now that I got your shopping list marked out for you, let's begin making the figure. What follows is perhaps the most important step of making a proportionally accurate paper model: the measuring. You can begin by drawing a straight line down your page, and then draw the character you wish to recreate, using the line as guidance for the height of your character. I've never shown how I draw before, and what you see is a very rough sketch of a random humanoid character, that I will base all my tutorial on. I'm sorry if this isn't Jonathan Joestar, but I will explain to you why I chose not to make him from scratch in another video. In case you can ignore my bad sketching, you can take notice of what you have to do next. Choose a measurable height for your figure. Here I chose 25 centimeters, but you could make your figure bigger, or even smaller than what I'm showing. Next you can add a title, but it's optional. What comes next is extremely important. Create a table or a list, similar to what you see. Put both heights of your drawing and paper figure as headings. What you want to do is to convert measurements of your drawing to the official measurements of your figure. To do that, you need to divide the official height by the drawn one. The result is a multiplier. You can times this number by any measurement of the drawing, and it shall become the measurement of your paper model, which you will use as reference. The more measurements you take of your drawing/character, the more accurate your figure will be to your character. Next, you can create a labeling table for each marker to use for your figure, like you see here on the right-hand side of the page. By the way, the drawing you see is the front view of your character. Don't limit yourself with what you see. You can draw the side view, top view and even the back view, as extra aid to your measurements. Another thing you can do is to create similar measurements and sketches of smaller parts of your character, such as a hand. I usually do this for the head of the character. Time to begin work now. The basic paper joint. Make note or acknowledge the width of the shoulder of your figure, and use that to approximately base your tube size on. By the way, to help you recognize the right measurements I used for the tube, here is a model showing width and length of a cylinder. Begin by rolling up a paper tube. For a heads up, this will be done many times throughout the whole tutorial. Make sure the tube is less wide than the shoulder that you measured. After that, secure it with a strand of tape. Cut off the excess. Next you've got to mark out the length of the tube with a pen or liner. Do it twice. Now, use scissors and cut the tube where you marked, and what you see should be the result. If the tubes of paper are bent up, just reshape them by squeezing the opposite side. Here is the length of the tube I decided for the shoulder. It is a bit longer than the width of the tube. If I had drawn a side view of my character, I would certainly know what the right length of this tube should be. Too bad. Next, cut out 2 strips of normal paper, and wrap them around like so. Don't wrap the whole of the strip onto one tube. You should cut the point that is closest to the other end. This way there will be no issues with the joint's rotation. Secure the sleeve of the pin with tape. Do it really well. Then cut out the excess. You want the sleeve of the pin to be narrower than the tube. Make sure you leave at least 2 mm of space from the edge of the pin on both sides. You will see why soon. Do the same exact thing for the other pin. Next thing to do is to wrap another tube of paper, thinner than the pin, but much longer. Divide the tube into 2. Cut them to a workable length as demonstrated. Time for glue. Apply some hot glue on the pin sleeve. Make sure it is not touching any of the pin surface, or the joint will get stuck. After that, attach one of the paper tubes to the pin sleeve. You can now see the tube created a shaft that makes up a part of the joint. Next comes a part that I used to think wasn't necessary, and that is, to reinforce the joint. For the record, this step is crucial to make your joint strong enough to not break easily. Cut out a strip of card, not paper, and glue it in a way that it wraps around both the pin sleeve and the new shaft. Once the glue is solid and secure, cut out excess bits of card that would make rotation difficult. Now, wrap a strip of tape around the card and shaft tightly. What I'll do now is create a new sleeve for the shaft that was just covered in tape. Cut out a strip of normal paper and wrap it properly around the tube. Secure it with tape, cut out the excess, and you now have a new point of motion. Time for a very annoying step to do, at least for me. Cut out 2 strips of card that are wide enough to accommodate the joint pin's width. Place the pin's end on one of the card pieces, and draw around it, like so. Do the same for the other strip. Now, get a piece of clay or plasticine, and poke a hole through the circles you've drawn on the card strips. This hole will facilitate the action of cutting around the circles on the strips. Now comes a step that always intrigues me. It is time to attach the strips to the pin of the joint. But before you start doing that, I suggest reinforcing the pin. A lot of feel and practice is optimal for this operation. Basically, you want the pin sit in the joint as tight as possible, while it is still movable. The pin should be just tight enough not to get blocked inside the sleeve. Don't wrap too much tape around the pin. Next, reinsert the pin in the sleeve, and test how tightly it fits in the sleeve. In case you think it is appropriately tight, leave it as it is. Once you are confident enough with the pin's rotation, you may apply the card strips from before, and secure them around the pin with glue. Make sure the glue doesn't come in contact with the pin, or it will get stuck. Now that both card strips are in place, cut around them to give them a more conventional shape. In case you were able to follow until now, congratulations! You made your first working paper joint. Next step is to make an exact copy of it. As you can see, I made one off screen. Check how well they work, but don't force them, especially the card strips. It is time now to unite both joints. To do that, begin by getting note of the shoulder width of your character, and keep the number in mind. In my case, the shoulder joint's total length should be 6.25 centimeters. You can measure this length with a ruler, but I preferred to cut out a paper strip to aid me. You can see how the joints should look together once unified. I used plenty of perspective to help me see this. Anyway, find half of 6.25 and use that number to mark out the center of the strip. Now position one of the shoulder joints like so, and mark out the point where the joint should be cut to fit in with the other joint. Once that's done, cut out the sleeve where you marked, and cut the excess shaft of the joint. Do the same thing for the other joint. You will hear these words many times more, by the way. You can now see that the unified joints should be of the desired length, meaning that you can connect them with tape applied like so. What you see here is the result. What I'll do now is the neck and head joint. The head joint's pin is slightly less long than the head's width, making it 2.2 centimeters long and as thick as you prefer. Meanwhile, as for how tall the joint is as a whole, you can deduce the height by measuring the distance between the center of the shoulder joint sleeves and the point of the head slightly below where the ears should be. After building upon the tube I just made, as you can see, the head joint seems to have nowhere to be attached to, unless you create a sleeve like so, on the shoulder joint sleeves. I hope that makes sense. The head joint was made the same way as the shoulder joints were. Briefly said, make the pin, then a sleeve, then a new longer pin, attach it to the sleeve, then reinforce the joint with card and tape, and add a sleeve to the lower shaft. I did not put anything on the pin of the joint, yet. You will see why eventually. After that you can attach the head joint by gluing a strip of card like so, covering both the neck joint sleeve and the sleeve of the head joint. This should be the result. Make sure the joint is placed in parallel with the shoulder joints, otherwise it will look strange. Let me point out though, that you don't have to worry too much if the base of your paper model is uneven or weird looking. You will eventually build upon it with layers of card, which will make up the real depth and look of your figure. The base model plays a minor role in all this, somewhat. Anyway, it is now time to make the middle body joint. The usual method is to measure the height of the character's body, and to divide in half that measurement, to get measured distance between the top of the shoulders and the midpoint of the body. So do that. The body height of my figure is 8 centimeters. Therefore 4 is the number I need. The width of the body shall be a point of reference for the length of this new pin I am making for the joint. Here it is. As you can see, it is quite wide. That's because I took in reference the estimated thickness of the body of my character, which is of 1.5 centimeters. I've even put the card strips as you can see. Also, the joint fits all right in the body already. This is a good sign. You might have noticed the joint has an F on it. That means front. This will help in the making of the outer body of the figure much later. You might see there is a second middle body joint. You don't have to make this extra joint. I will explain at the end of the video why there's one. However, I will introduce you to it a bit. This joint is the gateway into one of my own ideas for figure making. It allows a wider range of motion. Anyway, once the middle body joint is secured and functional, You can attach it by following the procedure you'll see in a second. You'd need to cut out a decently sized tube of paper and divide it into two. These two tubes will provide support to the middle body joint once it is attached. What you have to do now is to cut with your scissors two gaps in between the tubes attached to the body. Like so. These gaps will provide a way to insert the middle body joint securely. Make sure it fits the size you need. 4 centimeters in my case. The tubes are too long, so I cut them appropriately. Now I fit the middle body joint like so, and put in a place that is good for me. Next you need to add glue to fix the joint in place. Cut some of the excess card, and this should be the result. To further secure the joint into place, get 2 pieces of card, and apply them like so. They should be covering the part between the shoulder sleeve and the tubes of the body. Here we are. Upper body is complete, I'd say. What starts now is the process to make the lower joints. I like to begin by measuring the total width of the hips. As you can see, they should be 4.375 centimeters wide. The thing to do next is to roll a tube of paper, as usual, and cut it out in a way that it matches the cylinder size I put here. Next thing to do is to build around the tube and make the right leg joint. As you can see, I already made one. You can also see that the shaft attached to the sleeve of the joint is very thin. There is a reason for that. To better incorporate 3 whole different rotation points in one point, it is best to reinforce the very first shaft, which in this case, is the right leg's shaft. Anyway, the thing to do next with the joint you made, is to cut out a simple strip of paper, and add glue to it. You want to wrap it around the thin pin of the joint like so. Reinforce the thing with tape. This is what you have now. Now I'll cut out another piece of card and wrap it around everything once more, whilst gluing it in, and then cut out the excess. Next, wrap tape around the shaft again, to make the thing rounder and more secured. Then cut out a strip of paper for the sleeve, wrap it around, and secure it with tape. Time to make the second leg joint now. Make the same size pin for the left leg joint, add a sleeve, but don't attach a tube on it. What you want to do is to cut out a strip of card, wrap it around the sleeve of the joint, and attach the strip to the sleeve of the right leg joint. The sleeve acts as a shaft for the pin. Quite ingenious of PaperPatriot, right? Secure the joint in place with glue. Apply it in the corners like so. This is the result. A sleeve for both joints is what you can do now. Simply wrap a strip of normal paper and put it in place with tape. Now it is time to see how everything fits together. The height of the body is 8 centimeters, as I said earlier. So in case the figure body is taller than that, I'll have to reduce the length of the middle body joint shaft. Otherwise, simply wrap a strip of card with glue around the sleeve of the leg joints, and the sleeve of the middle body joint, like you see here. Cut out excess card, and add more glue where necessary. The next thing to do is to simply elaborate the leg joints, like you did earlier with the shoulder joints. By that I mean, taking strips of card, cutting holes in them to fit the pins of the leg joints, and securing them with glue. The result before you is what you're aiming for, I guess. Check the motion of each joint you made for the lower leg. What comes next is slightly monotone, I suppose. You will have to cut up 4 identical 1 centimeter long tubes of paper and build a joint around them. Make the shafts extra long, because these joints shall be the knee and foot joints. Make sure to check and test how they fit together in a way that they correspond to the height they're supposed to be in. Also try and make them very well aligned. Otherwise your figure will look like as if it has scoliosis. Anyway, attach knee joints to the sleeves of the foot joints. Do shift the foot sleeve of the foot joint forward a bit. This way, when you'll be working on the outer body of the lower leg, it will look more anatomically correct. By the end of fixing up joints to where they should be, you will get this. Hopefully. And at this point you can already try to measure how tall the figure shall be. Here it seems to be a bit on the short side, but it's okay. In case the legs are too short, I can just add tubes to the ends of their joints shafts, in a way that they will be longer in the end, thus making their figure as tall as it should be. Also, keep in mind that the head joint is not as tall as the head itself. So there is still plenty of work to do, to result in a taller figure. By now I assume you have figured out what to do next. Use the same method as shown for the shoulder joints, to make the elbow joints and the wrists. These should be identical in size and shape. I'd like to show how difficult it may be to make wrist joints. You'd be dealing with a very thin tube of paper, that is already hard to make on itself. Furthermore, you would have to wrap a shaft tight enough, so that the wrist joint isn't loose. This may be hard for a beginner, but it still is annoying and difficult for someone like me, who is more in the middle of the road when it comes to figure making expertise, I think. Following after making the wrist joints, attach them to the elbow joints, to complete both arms. We are done. Well, I am. What you see before you is the finished skeleton of the figure. Articulation all works, and nothing is falling apart. For now, this tutorial is split into 2 parts. The next part shall be finalized in a following video of mine, so I suppose you can stay tuned in for it, as it should be uploaded eventually. Before I leave you to it, I shall explain a few things. I bet you remember the second joint I displayed as the middle body joint. I have come up with a joint that allows for vertical and horizontal rotation, which creates the ball joint effect, where the range is incredibly smooth, and has no limited direction. I will make a video all about this one idea of mine, that is, the paper ball joint as I like to call it. Other than that, I am going to answer some questions that I think are commonly asked, or that could be asked about this tutorial/channel. First question. Why isn't this a tutorial of a Jonathan Joestar figure, as you technically promised? The answer to this might be a bit weird, but here I go. I didn't make a tutorial on Jonathan Joestar because I could not put myself in a position where I could record what I'm doing, while also working on the figure. This tutorial was already very hard to make, and I think that making a tutorial of Jonathan would be near impossible for now at least. I can hopefully say that I might eventually find the strength and dedication to make a tutorial for a figure of Jonathan, but for now I cannot do much. I'm sorry if any of you are upset about this. Second question. Should I follow your tutorial to the letter? As an answer I will say, no, but if you can, go ahead. I made this tutorial as a primary way to inspire others to also create works of their own, while spreading the information needed as a beginning step in this particular type of paper craft. Following what I do in this tutorial is a good way to learn the process, but the bricks that I've laid are only the foundation, on what others will put their own bricks onto. I hope you get what I'm trying to express. As an example of the range I got to work with, here is a double elbow joint I never used in a figure, but that I am planning to use eventually. Also, I suppose the ball joint I made up is somewhat innovative. Third question. Will you make more JoJo figures? And what other kind of franchise/universe would you make other figures from? I will certainly try making more JoJo figures, but to be completely honest, I started to sort of derail from the anime. Well, for certain, I do still love this anime series, but I suppose other things and animes are on my mind. I am fan of quite many franchises and animes, from Star Wars, to Spider-Man, to Jujutsu Kaisen. So, I suppose you cannot say for certain that I'm willing to not do figures of those listed franchises. Those were all the questions I could think of that I can answer. In case you have questions, do type them in the comment section below in case you want it answered in another video I shall make eventually. This was tutorial 1 on how I make figures. Stay tuned for tutorial 2, where I will make the outer body of the figure. Also, I don't like to invite others to do this, but in this case I could let it pass. I suggest you click the notification bell icon near the subscribe button. Let me tell you why. Other than videos, I like to upload posts on the community section of my channel. These posts may contain something you might never get the chance to see if you don't click the bell. I hope I'm not making this sound annoying. My posts so far showcased a figure of Joseph Joestar from part 2 of the JoJo anime, and even King Kong from the Godzilla 2021 movie. I think not many people have seen those posts, since there seem to be so little amount of comments. I am dragging too much. Anyway, I honestly want to thank all my viewers and subscribers for supporting me with your comments. I appreciate it dearly. Also, what on earth? About 500 subscribers? Other than that, thank you for watching. See you again soon. By the way, here is all the waste generated from this tutorial. Okay, I'm off now. Bye.